Hello, listeners. Welcome to Marie Lives the Horror. This is episode 12 of the series of True Paranormal Ghost Stories. In this episode, I bring you 7 terrifying tales of true paranormal experiences. So without further ado, step into my horror chamber as we live the horror together. Number 1. The old man still walks on his land. Here's another story. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, we lived in an older farmhouse. My daughter was around 8 or 9 years old. She was a normal little tomboy, not afraid of anything until we moved into this house. In the summer, we usually stayed outside late with friends who came over often. My daughter refused to go in the house alone at night for any reason. If she had to go in for whatever reason, she would always make me or her older brother go in with her. She said it was scary in there alone. As long as someone was in the house, she was fine. She came in our bedroom one night and woke us up. She said, "Daddy, there's a man walking around in the kitchen." My husband told her to go back to bed and he would go see who it was. My husband went and checked and no one was in the house and all the doors were still locked. She did this a couple of different times, but no one was ever there. My husband got hurt and was out of work for a while. One morning after the kids were gone to school and I was at work, my husband said that he was still lying in bed when he heard the outside door open and close and footsteps coming down the hall. He was lying with his face to the wall and felt someone come into the room and sit down on the bed. He said he rolled over and asked, "What did you forget?" thinking that I had come back in. As he rolled over, he saw that no one was there, but could see the indentation on the bed as if someone was sitting there. He sat there in shock for a minute, and then whatever this thing was, got up, and he could hear footsteps going back down the hall and the door closing. He said that he would hear noises around the house and around the barn on different days while he was out of work. We decided that it was the old man that had previously lived there and had died on the property. My husband got used to hearing things and seeing things move. He told the ghost that we didn't mind him checking up on the house, but to quit coming in late at night because he was scaring our daughter. After that, my daughter never woke us up scared at night. One summer night, the kids were in the living room watching TV. My husband was in the bedroom on the computer, and I was sitting at the kitchen table doing some paperwork. The door was open, but the screen door was closed. It was the old kind of screen door that closes with a spring. Our small kitten was lying in the corner. All of a sudden, the screen door opens and closes. I look up, and there is no one there. The little kitten stands up, arches his back, and starts hissing. It watches the door and turns it towards the hall while still hissing. Once whatever has gotten out of the kitten's sight, it lies back down and curls up like nothing happened. I'm sure the ghost had opened the door, walked through the kitchen, and down the hall. We lived there several years and occasionally heard things, but we were never actually afraid. After we moved, the house and all of the buildings were torn down, and retirement apartments were built. I often wonder when I go by there if the ghost is still there, walking on his land. Number 2. Haunted childhood home near Black Hope Cemetery. Sorry for any errors, since this is my first post. I have many stories and encounters from this house. I lived there for about 10 years, and now that I've moved out of it, I finally realized that the things that happened were not just me being quote-unquote crazy. Many different occurrences happened there. We had cabinets and doors slamming, running footsteps in empty rooms, actually seeing people or figures, sleep paralysis and nightmares. Anyone that came over said they were afraid to be alone in my house, to the point where I had to walk friends to and from different rooms. I'm writing this because I just recalled a situation that happened. This was about 7 years ago now. My friend, let's call her Tara, and I were sophomores in high school at the time. She was spending the night, and we were doing what normal teenage girls do: eating lots of snacks, getting on the internet, taking hundreds of pictures, and just being dumb, really. Nothing out of the ordinary for our age. All of this took place in my game room, which was just an open space that had a sectional couch, TV, and desktop computer. We fell asleep and everything was completely fine until we woke up the next day. We were eating lunch when she decided to look through the pictures we had taken. She looked at me really confused, so I asked her, "What's up?" And she said, "Why would you take pictures of me sleeping?" At this point, I'm like, what the hell is she talking about? She shows me, and there's about 5 pictures of her sleeping from different angles, like someone was standing right above her taking pictures of her. I thought she was just joking. She must have taken them herself, but both of her arms were in the photos. We couldn't explain it, so we kind of just let it go. We never brought it up again, but we definitely never slept in the game room again. Now, this was a 2-story house, and I also remember hearing voices, and from time to time, you would see shadows. On 2 occasions, I actually saw solid physical people. I will say nothing violent ever really happened, but too close for comfort is a good way to say it. It still freaked us out. One of the first things I ever saw was a figure of a grown man. Many people over the years have said they saw him too, but just chalked it up to their own imagination. He usually just walked around and didn't bother anyone. The second time I saw something I was asleep when I halfway woke up, turned around to get comfortable, and I saw a little boy crouched next to my bedside table. He disappeared very quickly, though. There was also the tall black figure, which many people experienced, and is what really made everyone feel very uncomfortable. There were many occasions where it would be close by and disappear as soon as you went to go look. For example, I was in the game room late one night, probably around 2 to 4 a.m. because I did not sleep well. Everything was normal, but I suddenly got the feeling I wasn't alone. I looked out of the corner of my eye and saw something that was completely black. I was in a lit up room, so I knew instantly that was not normal. I jerked my head to look, and it was completely gone. I was completely alone. I've had dreams of whatever this thing is watching me sleep. Normally, I would just say, "Oh, I'm freaking myself out." But everything was normal in my dream, like a carbon copy of my room. To this day, I need some kind of light when I'm sleeping because I'm afraid that when I wake up, I won't be alone. There were also a few times where people have gotten random scratches in places there's no way for you to really reach. Although this could have been from unwillingly scratching themselves during sleeping. Even though everything is all good now, since we no longer live in that home. Just for reference, this home is in a neighborhood that is very near to Black Hope Cemetery in CROSBY, Texas. Number 3. The girl in the bathroom. These experiences have and will forever haunt me. My town's middle school is an eerie place. The basement had tons of secret corridors that led to various places that made you think of what the purpose was for them. It was once the old high school that goes back over at least 100 years. I am currently a student at the newly built high school, so I no longer experience anything. But this particular experience is about the girl in the bathroom. Now, if you are looking for a new Moaning Myrtle, you have a whole new thing coming. It started in 5th grade, my first of 4 years in that school. There was a bathroom next to the gym. It was never used. It looked like it had never been renovated. All the bathrooms had seemed renovated and brand new, but this one had old pink and blue wallpaper and bright orange stalls. It was always quiet, so I tried to use it a lot. Until something strange happened to me. Once I was using it before I headed to lunch. I heard a knock on the stall, and I responded with, "Someone's in here." And I heard no reply back. Not even footsteps. Confused, I looked under the door and saw no shoes. Nobody could have gotten out of the bathroom without me hearing the footsteps, or even the door opening and closing. So in a panic, I walked out, washed my hands, and bolted to the lunchroom. I was so shaken, and I didn't use this specific bathroom again for the rest of that year. When I entered 6th grade, I brushed it off as just my imagination and began using this specific bathroom again. I know I'm stubborn, no need to rub it in. I walked in and heard a girl's whisper say, "Hi," right in my ear. I even felt the breath. I was frozen. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a girl standing there in a black dress with stockings and flats, looking at me, smiling. This evil smile. It's like someone had taken a knife and slit her mouth cheek to cheek to make her smile bigger. But the smile isn't what scared me. It was her eyes. They were pitch black. They looked almost hollow. Then something clicked in my head. She didn't have eyes at all. Still frozen, I shut my eyes, trying to forget the girl I saw. Finally, I built up the strength to move and bolted out of the bathroom. For years after what happened, I felt a pull towards that bathroom. In 8th grade, a school historian came to our school. He had taken an interest and knew everything on what happened there. Trust me, there was a lot of history in that school. I asked him about that bathroom, hoping he knew something. To my surprise, he actually did. He told me of a girl who was 15. She was bullied by this boy. One day, she was found in that bathroom, dead. Her mouth slit into that smile. Her eyes were torn out of her body. The boy was sentenced to years in prison, but he died of a medical condition before his time was up. I cried right there. I saw that girl. From that point on, they blocked that bathroom from students and finally renovated it. Every time I walked past it, I felt this terrible grief overtake me. To the girl in the bathroom, I'm sorry. P.S. This happened a while ago, to the point where the media never covered it. No one knew of her death except the people who lived in our small town back then. It's honestly so sad. Please, don't be a bully. If you think anyone or yourself is in trouble, please seek help. Number 4. My haunted childhood home. Now, I don't remember much of it, as I was very young when we lived there, 3 or 6 years old. But I remember that I always went to sleep in my parents' room. I would have dreams about a man pulling a woman's hair, with a kid yelling, "Stop, Dad, stop." This isn't exactly normal dreams for a child that's not even able to grasp the concept of marital violence, but nonetheless, they were reoccurring. I went to sleep in my parents' room, and they carried me to my room when they were going back to bed, which mostly helped, but sometimes I would start having these dreams again, and I would end up back in their room. My father worked offshore, and we used to be at our grandma's house every now and then, leaving our mom alone. And she said all sorts of things happened. The recliner chair would move like someone was sitting down in it, and she would hear various sounds. She would also see a small man standing next to her bed. My father brushed off her experience, saying she was just imagining things because she was alone. But even he said there was one time where he had no explanation. They were in bed about to sleep when suddenly they heard a large crash in the kitchen. He said it literally sounded like the whole entire kitchen exploded. They ran down, and there was absolutely nothing out of place. Nothing explaining what sounded like a wrecking ball smashing the kitchen. One of the creepiest things my mother told me was when our tenant in the basement asked if we had had a party during the weekend. My mom told him, "No, how come?" He then told her that he had seen faces in every window of the house. This was a large house with many windows. We moved many years ago, and my mother kept in touch with the people that moved in. And while they said there was something weird every now and then, it seems like it's much calmer now. Does anyone know what any of this could have been? I was thinking of the spirit from the family in my dreams, but when the tenants said there were faces in every window, that sounds like something much more serious, doesn't it? Number 5. Someone was ripping my apartment apart. Okay, so I'll try and make this as short as possible. When I was about 19, my friend and I got an apartment together. It was an old apartment above a local bar downtown. It came fully furnished. Everything down to the silverware came with the apartment. We thought that was cool since it was our first place, and we really didn't have much. Here's a mini backstory. Growing up, my parents ghost hunted, so our family vacations were going to the most haunted places ever and investigating. So the paranormal isn't anything new to me. I've seen all kinds of things, but this apartment was something different. So the first couple of days in this apartment felt odd. Things would move, and everyone had a weird vibe. My friend experienced some sleep paralysis so horrible, we would sleep together in the same bed. We constantly heard things, knocking, footsteps, etc. We actually went and adopted a cat from our local shelter so we could blame some of the noises on the cat. Oddly enough, this actually helped. One of the scariest nights of my life. My friend and I were in her room, just talking and hanging out. We passed out, and around 2 in the morning, she wakes me up, whispering. She tells me to be quiet and listen. It sounded like someone was in our kitchen, just tearing it apart and rummaging through our stuff. She tells me that she thinks someone broke into the apartment. At this point, we're both paralyzed. Imagine someone just ripping open your kitchen cabinets and drawers and just throwing the contents out in an aggressive manner. As we were laying there paralyzed, I looked over and noticed our bedroom door was wide open. I whispered to her that we need to close it ASAP. She runs and slams the door, locks it, and puts a chair in front of it. Everything went silent and cold. After a few moments of silence, we hear pounding on the walls in the kitchen and living room and frantic footsteps. The sounds of tearing up our home started up again. At this point, we're freaking out in full-on panic mode. She calls her mom. I have no idea why we didn't just call the police. Her mom was right down the road, and that's the first person she thought of. Her mom and dad were on their way. While we're waiting, the noise starts to subside. We hear little movement. Right before her parents got there, we heard the banging again, and then full-on footsteps running down the hall to our room. The footsteps stopped right in front of our door when we hear her mom yell for us, and we both felt instant relief. Except her mom is pissed and starts yelling at us that we were playing games. We come out of the room and not a single thing was moved. Nothing was out of place. We were so certain that someone had broken in, and we didn't even think that it could have possibly been a ghost. We ended up going back with her parents and staying the night with them, and shortly moved out of that apartment. A few months down the road, my uncle was telling me that he lived in one of the apartments by our old apartment. He then proceeds to tell me how haunted our apartment is and that a young guy lived there alone. One night, he slit his wrists and regretted his decision. He had rummaged through his apartment to try and find something to stop the bleeding, and eventually tried to run to his room before he collapsed in the hallway and died. In all my years ghost hunting with my parents, nothing has chilled me to the bone like that. Listening to that story my uncle told me gave me chills. I knew that what we heard had been residual activity. With all of those things in the apartment that used to be his, there was definite energy and attachment still there. It was also really sad, imagining we heard that guy's last moments, and explains why everything was so frantic. Number 6. 3 a.m. is the devil's hour. This is my first ever post on Reddit, so sorry if my writing is bad. So this is a story that happened a couple of years ago when I went back to my homeland of Malaysia on holiday. It started when I went to visit my cousin and his mom for 2 nights. So at the time, my cousin was living with his mom, and they lived in a pretty big house. The day I arrived at his place, he told me about an experience he had 2 nights prior. He was chilling in his room when suddenly the handle on his door started turning. He looked at the door, and for about 5 minutes, the handle just kept turning as if someone was trying to open the door. He never keeps his door locked, so it was strange that the door never actually opened. He called out his mom's name a few times, but she was asleep. He checked the time and it was 3:13 a.m. Apparently, 3 a.m. is supposed to be the devil's hour. The next day, he was visiting his aunt and told her the story. She gave him a weird look and asked him what time this happened. She then told him that around 3:10 a.m. the same night, she heard someone knocking on her bedroom window. The knocking went on for roughly 10 minutes, and then it just stopped. Fast forward to the first night that I spent at his place. We were just chilling in his room talking. He was sitting on his bed, and I was sitting up against his bedroom door. Suddenly, we both heard 3 quick, loud knocks on the door, and his door handle started turning. I looked at the door, expecting for his mom to walk in. It was pretty late, and we were being kind of loud, but nothing happened. We both looked at each other and instantly knew we needed to check the time. It was 3:05 a.m. We sat for a while, waiting to see if anything else would happen to the door, but nothing happened. After a few minutes, we both settled down and went back to chatting. All of a sudden, we heard a crash coming downstairs from the kitchen. It sounded like a bunch of pots and pans had fallen on the ground. This happened at 3:12 a.m. We immediately ran out of the room to his mom's room to check on her, but she was fast asleep. After mustering up some courage, we were both freaking out. We decided to go downstairs together to investigate. It was really creepy because it was pitch black downstairs as all the lights were off. It seemed like the longest walk of my life when it only took us 20 seconds to walk over to the kitchen. We turned on the lights, and scattered across the floor were a bunch of pots and pans that were stored in a closed cupboard. We cleaned everything up and went back upstairs. The next day, we told his mom about everything that happened. His mom, being a big believer in the paranormal, told us that the events were no coincidence, as 3 a.m. was the ghost hour. I'll leave it up to you to decide if we had a genuine paranormal experience, or we were just imagining stuff. But this would have to be the second scariest experience I've had. The first can be a story for another day. Number 7. My childhood haunting. When I was maybe 4 years old, me and my family were living in a very small house on the very edge of OKC. Our great aunt Susie used to live there, and we moved in after my parents got married 2 years earlier. I had a room I shared with my baby sister, and we had an old block television in there with us. One night, my mom came into the room while I was watching TV and told me to turn it off. I did, and she went to her room. But when she got into her room, she heard the TV turn on again, and then she heard me say, "Mama said to turn it off." So then, it turned off. Maybe 5 minutes later, she heard it turn on again and heard me say in a more intense voice. Mama said, "Turn it off." And it turned off again. It didn't do that again after that night. Another thing that happened in that house was this stuffed toy I found. It had a voice box, batteries. It was supposed to sing the alphabet song, say I was its best friend and all that. It would talk to me like it was a person, not a stuffed toy with a set amount of things it can say. My mom threw it out as soon as she heard it. Other things that happened in that house cannot be explained. Once, my mom heard a bang come from my room, and she ran in thinking I knocked something over, but I didn't. The bang she heard was me being thrown across the room by something. Another thing that happened was my favorite stuffed animal, Henry the bunny, was dancing upside down on the ceiling. My mom came into my room after hearing me scream bloody murder. My mom also saw a cowboy walking up to the back porch, opening the screen door, and then disappearing. I don't remember the address to this house. All I remember was that the porch was green, and next to the neighborhood there was a large blue metal wall, and my Catholic school that I went to till I was 6 wasn't too far away. So there's my ghost story. Thanks for reading. Hello, listeners. Thank you for listening to this episode of True Paranormal Ghost Stories as you live the horror with me. If you would like to submit some of your own true paranormal experiences for me to narrate on this channel, check the description down below and send them over to my email. Do not forget to subscribe and click on the notification bell to keep up with future episodes. Thanks for listening. I am your host, Marie Lives the Horror.